Let's go to one of the people that we go to whenever we need to find out what is going on at the heart of government, a man who was at the heart of government not that long ago. So Robbie Gibb, who worked with Theresa May when she was Prime Minister in Downing Street. Let's find out what he can tell us about how everything is being handled. So Robbie, a very good morning to you. Welcome.
Good morning.
Thanks very much indeed for joining us. This must be a terribly difficult time to be in charge of the country, to be in government. However, I suppose in some ways it very much focuses the mind and it very much focuses Boris Johnson on what the job is at hand.
I mean, just stepping back from it, I think the government, there's lots of criticism from people on Twitter and other areas, but if you just step back from it, I think the government are doing a very good job in difficult circumstances. And I think the key thing, just right from the outset, make it clear, is I think the government taking a decision right at the beginning to follow the science, and then with the science, getting the science advice, putting the scientists right up front and centre is incredibly reassuring.
Yes.
That the government are taking the very best advice.
And both of the scientists that we're seeing every day, Messrs. Vallance and Whitty, are really very convincing. They seem to know what they've got to deal with. They seem to be very measured, and they're very, for me anyway, they build my confidence when I see them speaking.
Yes, absolutely right. And I think there's all kinds of people saying there's been a U-turn, that the strategy's not working, comparing what we're doing in the UK with other countries in the world. And there's a lot of sort of armchair critics who, frankly, should spend more time trying to be helpful, but by asking people to follow the advice and social distancing and helping support your local shops and takeaways and looking after friends and neighbours and the elderly. But just if you just step back, what is the government strategy is incredibly clear and simple. Is we all know at some point there's going to be a huge spike in the number of severe cases of this terrible virus. And the government's strategy right from the very beginning was to try and flatten that peak so that the NHS can cope. And the point at which we use more draconian measures as a country, such as the closing the schools, or what I suspect will happen tomorrow or Saturday, basically banning people from using restaurants and pubs in central London, they're all part of a measured, science-driven policy strategy, which, as you said, it is reassuring. But what I find disappointing is that there are still politicians who are still trying to make partisan points during this process, and people on Twitter, as I was saying, whipping up fear. There are so many productive things people can be doing with their time, but whipping up fear and worry is the last thing that people should be doing.
Well, it really is, and I absolutely couldn't agree with you more. I mean, Piers Morgan's a former employer of mine. He used to be my boss at the Mirror, and he's a great guy, and he's a brilliant strategist. He's a fantastic journalist, he's a great broadcaster, but I think he's really, really barking up the wrong tree at the moment by having a go at the government constantly for not doing what he thinks they should be doing, because after all, what the hell does he know about it?
Well, this is the thing. If I don't know where, if he had an illness, God forbid, and he needed some expert advice about a condition, would he go to a TV presenter or would he go to the best possible advice?
Well, exactly.
Let me guess.
And the other thing that really I almost said the wrong word there for a second, got to me yesterday was Jeremy Corbyn, who just can't bring himself to be in tune with a Tory government, which is actually doing quite a good job. He minces around, he moans and groans, and he sort of reluctantly pats them on the back, but then with the second question comes out with what they're not doing rather than what they are doing.
Yeah, it's and Gordon Brown as well this morning on the Today programme. Yeah. They say, I'm not playing party politics, and then play party politics.
Yes.
Frankly, I saw him. I forgot that he was still leader of the opposition. He tried to inject himself, and he just hasn't taken the message that what people want from politicians in opposition in normal times, but particularly now, are not politicians who are trying to get political advantage. It is too serious. It matters so much for people, and what they want are answers, and they want their politicians to raise their game. And yet again, I think personally that Jeremy Corbyn has shown why he wouldn't have been the right person to be Prime Minister, and you just sort of think, thank God we're not in a situation with him and his acolyte running number 10 now.
Well, I mean, to be honest, I'd also forgotten that Gordon Brown used to be Prime Minister. Now that you've reminded me, I'm feeling a bit unwell. So I think I was going to see some medical assistance in the rest of the building. But you know, what happens next? Because, of course, this is an unprecedented scene, and we keep hearing that. But I think as time has gone by, I have been one of those people who was accused of not taking this seriously enough. And I still believe that some of the measures are perhaps more, I don't know, prophylactic, shall we say, than they need to be. But I understand why they have to be done. And I'm certainly no longer the person that says, I'm going to keep going out. You know, I went out for a drink on Monday and Tuesday, and I thought yesterday when somebody asked me if I wanted to go to the pub, I actually said no, because it feels wrong now.
Yes, I mean, there are so many unknown factors. I mean, if you take the example of China, you know, it's been discussed this morning that there's been some very positive news from China, that there's been no new cases as of yesterday. But therefore people are then leaping to a criticism again, where they say, why didn't we do what they've done earlier? So there's two issues there that, you know, we still don't know the answer to. Right. Firstly, how long can we keep people at home working? You know, maybe 4 months with your... You know, it's quite fun for the first couple of days. You know, you get a few jobs done, but then you look ahead, you think that is alarming. But also, I mean, the more sort of scientific and medical point is what happens when those controls and restrictions are lifted in China. You know, and I mean, my understanding, I'm not a scientist, I'm no Piers Morgan, is that will it all come back again, and that is what we still don't know.
Right. And that is the difficulty, isn't it? Because one of the things I'm going to try and get at this morning is to talk to people about how they access the money that the government has promised them. For example, I've had loads of taxi drivers be in touch with me over the course of the last 12 hours or so saying, what do we do? You know, we've literally lost almost all the income we would have had. And this is in all parts of the country, not just in London. You know, how easy is that going to be? And because we do know that government machinery can be very kind of arduous to navigate.
That's absolutely right. I mean, you know, these are unprecedented times. It's a great cliche, but it absolutely
it really is. Yeah,
it is. And I'm not going to say I'm not going to come on here saying I have the answers. But one of the good things about working when I worked at Number 10 is what you never see is just the sheer skill of our civil service. You know, they've been coming to a lot of criticism for different reasons, and they can't really answer back. But what they are very, very good at is managing these kind of crises. And the speed at which the government have come forward with various packages, you know, some of these packages in normal times would take months and months to put together. The long-term plan for the NHS, which I helped work on when I worked at Number 10, took 6 months to work on. And now we've seen significant measures already announced. I understand there'll be more announcements either tomorrow on the economic front coming their way. But you're right. I one of my local Indian restaurants who I go to in normal times, and I was doing my little bit to order a takeaway, and the manager told me that they've had big cancellations, and he's going to have to lay off all his staff. I mean, there's this assumption if you work for a big company that if you're staying at home and you're not working, then you continue to get paid. But a lot of these small businesses, they lay them off and they don't get paid. So let's just hope that the government, well, I'm sure they are, looking at ways to deal. I mean, Boris said something I thought very, very insightful in one of his daily press conferences. That firstly that nothing is ruled out, and no one should be punished for no fault of their own. And that's, I think, people working for local restaurants, work very, very hard on relatively low income. The community and the government need to step up.
No, I think that's absolutely right, because as much as we can do the takeaway thing from restaurants that we would normally go out to, that's going to still be a very, very small amount of people and a very small amount of revenue. And I think I've been hearing from all sorts of restaurateurs who, one who said, I think last night on Talk Radio, normally they would do 400 covers on any given evening, and they're now currently doing 40. So it's a tenth, basically, of what they would normally take in. I was hearing from Cyrus Todiwala, who's on Saturday Kitchen quite a bit, owns Cafe Spice in Aldgate. He said his restaurants in Heathrow's Hilton are revealing that apparently out of 350 rooms at the Hilton, only 18 are occupied. So this is a massive, massive financial problem.
Yeah, and what we have seen by, listening to the news and listening to your summary just before you came to me, it's what is revealed is just the interconnectivity. Yeah. My local dry cleaners, they may have to go under because they do a lot of the dry cleaning and washing for local hotels. Hotels are, the whole thing is interconnected. It's incredibly complicated, and that sort of gets me back to my point I made earlier. Is the government are having to respond to all this complex nature to trying to keep the country going. And what we need to do as a country, what we need to do if people of leadership roles in the media and elsewhere.
Yes, exactly right.
The attitude and just pull together and support people. It's good in Parliament. Yes, I was watching the parliamentary proceedings, and MPs are asking very sensible questions. But for me, there's a sort of a tone of sort of a criticism, as if somehow, if only they were in control and they were in charge, it'll all be fine.
Yeah.
The truth is, it is incredibly complicated. We've got the best people on the job. We need to pull everyone's resources and effort together, both in politics and on the front line, but also in local communities.
Yes, and also to understand the process and in some ways the strategy, looking back on it, it's actually worked rather well, because when they announced yesterday they were going to shut schools, I've got 2 teenage boys, one of whom is now no longer going to be doing his GCSEs. He's kind of confused about whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, because he was hoping to pull himself up a little bit by doing the exams. Now he's not so sure. But in the end, it looks like they did the right thing, because had they done this 2 weeks ago, it probably would have been too early. It might have caused all kinds of problems in the NHS and in other areas where people need to look after their children at home. And in fact, the longer this goes on, the better it looks for Boris.
Yes, and I mean, the interesting what's happened. Yesterday, they had to close because the number of schools that had closed anyway had jumped from just 70 schools had closed to nearly 500, because teachers were self-isolating, teachers not turning up. So they had to announce the closure so they could do it in a controlled way. But I think I'm actually being impressed by, it's not by the best of both, if I could say,
yes.
that you are closing the schools, which on the best advice of the scientists to control the spread of infection, but also keeping a skeleton facility open so that the children of people working on the front line for doctors and nurses can still go. They can still go to work because their kids have been looked after. When I first heard that, I thought, oh, poor kids.
Yeah.
Everybody else at home and enjoying themselves. But I was reassured to hear this morning that they wouldn't be being put through lessons. They would also be having more recreational activities.
Yes.
But also, I mean, people are very glib because there's so much going on. One line just doesn't get the attention that it should. Keeping the schools opening in the way that they're planning means that some of the most vulnerable children will still get the care and support that they need. So it's a good package done under very, very difficult circumstances and very, very fast.
Yes. And what happens next? And I know that whenever I used to ask this question when we were in the midst of the Brexit stalemate, which seems so long ago now, I've completely forgotten about it, right? I mean, what does happen next? Because there's not very much more that can be done other than a total kind of shutdown of movement altogether.
Yeah, well, you're absolutely right. Well, I think there are other measures I think there's a turning off the tap and trying to flatten that curve. But very, very soon we'll be in the heart of it. And we've with all the practical elements about this, we need to think about what's actually going to happen, because all the reports are some people the illness would pass through, without note, but some people become incredibly ill and it's quite unpleasant.
Yeah.
So we've got to get through. I mean, the government's doing all kinds of things, my understanding, in getting more kit and ventilators into hospitals and buy ourselves time. And one point about the ongoing historic criticisms of pharmaceutical companies, they are the people that are going to save us with a vaccine, with appropriate testing. And I just think we should, as a country, away from all this, is actually show more support for businesses generally, and particularly the pharmaceutical industry, who